famous board game is now Monopoly the
BS! Bullshit!
game. Here come the players.
For reasons someone like me can't possibly comprehend, Monopoly has a long history of console ports. And well, most of them have at least some merit to them. But it's kind of unfortunate how no one particular Monopoly game is the ultimate experience, so to speak. For example, I always felt like the NES version of Monopoly played the fastest out of most of the video game variants I've seen. And for that, it's by preference. But I can also see the merit in, say, the DOS port with the flashier graphics, or the PlayStation version with the 3D CGI stuff. And for that, I'll try looking into any particular version. So before we get into Monopoly 2 BS, let's check. Here's a bit of the vanilla version. Ape Software, none other than the creators of Earthbound themselves, decided to try taking on the sequel to Monopoly. I suppose if there's anyone you'd trust with that job, it'd be the creators of one of the greatest JRPGs on the Super Famicom, huh? But then you'd think, how would they get it to work? And the answer to that? Well, they make JRPGs, so let's take Monopoly and make it a JRPG, yeah! I can't wait to take on Kefka and Lavos at Monopoly! Of course, that's not how it actually goes, but that's amusing to think about. But yeah, here we have this Monopoly JRPG where you interact with NPCs and you presumably challenge them in Monopoly in order to become the Monopoly Master, I guess. If this is called Monopoly 2, then by that logic, wouldn't Super Mario RPG be called, like, Super Mario World 3? Super Mario Bros. 5? Something like that? Then again, these are the same guys that made Moonside. I suppose I shouldn't question that logic. Anyway, to summarize the relevance, Monopoly 2 BS is basically based off this game's engine, and it shares many of the same music, graphics, and characters. So let's move on to it now. The placing of the BS on the title screen seems so weird. Anyway, there's a lot of technical jargon about the Japanese release that I can theoretically ramble about, but I don't want to go over 10 minutes, so I'll get to the point about the gameplay details. Monopoly 2 BS cuts the JRPG part of the game out and just sends you straight into a Monopoly match. You might think that's kind of like throwing Ness right in the Gygax, but when you think about it, the world of BSX was already a JRPG, and Monopoly 2 BS heavily interacts with it in regards to your money. So I suppose the JRPG part was a redundancy. But unfortunately, the game isn't really retailed enough accordingly. You're still very much dealing with the AI opponents from the JRPG line. And on that note, why is there no multiplayer mode? I mean, seriously, it's Monopoly. If I really wanted to play with myself, I'd have a lot better options than this. I mean, yeah, the Satellaview didn't have that many multiplayer experiences, but you'd think Monopoly would be the multiplayer experience. But nope! Also, the matches tend to go at a fairly slow pace from my perspective. My first time trying to Red Cup ROM, I was playing for over an hour and a half. Well, playing might not be the best way to phrase it. This sequence. To explain what's going on here, this is basically the game's bartering screen, where players will try to trade properties and money and whatnot. But what this game loves to do especially, that really gets on my nerves really fast, is having the AI be constantly on these screens. And here's the typical pattern. One computer opponent tries to negotiate a deal with the other computer opponent. The other computer opponent haggles and haggles and haggles. And then eventually the deal is rejected. This sequence in and of itself takes 50 seconds, but then it starts again! Now the roles have reversed, but the trade attempt is the exact same deal. And the exact same thing is going to happen. There's going to be a bunch of haggling, and then it's not going to be traded. And the worst part of this will happen every turn until there's a drastic change in the status quo of the game. Combined with the points of non-interaction that are more typical in a board game converted to a video game, and you are left stuck, staring at a screen for minutes at a time while nothing happens. This may be acceptable in a JRPG-like game, but I just wanted to play Monopoly! And yeah, I know people complain that Monopoly games can go pretty long, but at least with the Monopoly games that go for a long time, you have a bunch of player turns happening. Here, the game is slow simply because the game is slow. And sometimes I swear the game goes out of its way to be as slow as possible. Every brief pause between a new screen popping up or before a character moves feels like lag. And it's not like the PlayStation version where it was for eye candy or something like that. This game doesn't look better than Monopoly 1. I don't see why I'd rather play it than Monopoly 1 yet. And coming from the guys that made Earthbound, that sounds really disappointing. Of course, on the other hand, it's very possible that the game had to be one of those you had to be there sort of things. Looking up the info on the broadcast on various Japanese websites, it said that the game was played during a broadcast of an interview with an actual Monopoly World Champion. And I'd imagine for hardcore Monopoly fans that that'd be really cool. In fact, when I think of it that way, maybe a lot of the aspects of the game make more sense if it's just something you just have in the background while you listen to this Monopoly champion talk about his experiences. And as such, it is really, really unfortunate that I do not have any recordings or archival of that. Because really, without it, the game's not really very fun. The main use I have for it is increasing my currency in my BSX saves, but besides that, I wouldn't really recommend it.
Don't be coming back now.
Please excuse the aspect ratio stuff. That's YouTube just being weird with the YouTube editor. Perhaps sometime later on I'll edit all the videos for better consistency in that regard. But until then, as a certain Mr. Iwata would put it, please understand.